All right, so wow, looking at this stack of game summaries, it seems like it was a pretty crazy night in the NBA. We've got blowouts, we've got upsets, and we've got some players putting on some serious shows out there. I mean, we've got Clippers, Hawks, Grizzlies, Warriors. We'd be here all day just listing teams.
It was a busy one. Lots of interesting outcomes, and those outcomes could have a big impact, down the stretch this season.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where you come in, right? You always seem to be able to see the bigger picture. You connect the dots, like between the results of these individual games and then how it all fits into, the entire league landscape.
I try. Let's dive in.
All right, sounds good. So let's start with that Clippers win over the Hawks. I mean, Paul George with 34 points. Kawhi gets the double-double, 25 points, 10 rebounds. The Clippers just, I don't know, they just looked really, really good out there.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting is the Clippers bench, they were on fire too. They put up 45 points. So this wasn't just a star-driven win. It was a full-on, team effort. And I think that depth and that balance, I think that's what makes them a real threat in the West, especially with other contenders like the Suns, maybe facing some depth issues of their own.
Yeah, and I mean, the Suns situation without Devin Booker definitely raises some questions, doesn't it? Speaking of contenders, Steph, I mean, he just did Steph things, 38 points in that Warriors win over the Grizzlies, 6 threes. I mean, some things never change, do they?
No, Curry was definitely doing Curry things. But you know what I think this game was more revealing about? The Grizzlies. I mean, Ja put up 29, 8 assists,
Yeah.
but they still couldn't close it out. And, that's a few close losses now lately for them. So it makes you wonder, do they have that extra gear to compete with those top teams?
Interesting. So maybe not quite contenders yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, on to Denver, where Jokic had, wait for it, another triple-double. 28 points, 12 rebounds, 10 assists. I mean, is this guy ever going to slow down?
It's honestly amazing, his consistency. But what stood out to me in this game against the Spurs wasn't actually just Jokic. It was the return of Jamal Murray.
Ah,
He
right.
had a solid 20 points and 8 assists. So, having Murray back, it just gives the Nuggets another scoring threat, and it takes some of the pressure off of Jokic.
Okay, so a healthy Jamal Murray, that could be a game changer for the Nuggets. Now, I know the Spurs lost, but I got to ask about Wembanyama. I mean,
Yeah.
24 points, 3 blocks. The hype is real, right?
It's undeniable, his potential. He's still raw, but those flashes of brilliance, I mean, the way he moves for his size, that shot blocking ability, it's all there. The Spurs are building around him, and his development, that's going to be a fascinating storyline, going forward.
Oh, absolutely. From a potential future star to some explosive scoring right now. Let's talk about the Bulls and Knicks. Zach LaVine, man, he goes off for 42 points. DeRozan with 31. The Bulls they just straight up, they outgunned the Knicks.
They did. They did. That offensive firepower was in full effect. But the Knicks, their defensive struggles, they were kind of alarming. I mean, Randall had a big game, 36 and 12, but they couldn't stop anybody, it seems like. Their defensive scheme, which relies so much on switching, I think teams with multiple scoring threats are starting to expose it a little.
So maybe a strategic issue there for the Knicks. This next game, this was a surprise. The Blazers taking down the Bucks. Scoot Henderson, breakout performance, leads the Blazers with 25 points, including some clutch shots down the stretch.
It is. It's fascinating. What's fascinating about this game is that Giannis had one of his more uncharacteristic performances. Yeah, he still put up big numbers, but the turnovers, the missed free throws, it just seemed like the Blazers' aggressive defense was kind of getting to him. It's a reminder that even the best players, they have vulnerabilities, and smart teams, they can exploit those.
So it wasn't just Scoot Henderson's brilliance. It was also, the Blazers' strategy that made a difference there.
Exactly. It's often the tactical nuances that separate wins from losses in the NBA.
Now, let's head west, where the Jazz, I mean, they just blew out the Heat. Lauri Markkanen, unstoppable, 32 points, 11 rebounds. And the Jazz as a team, I mean, they shot incredibly well.
They're exceeding all expectations, that's for sure. They're playing with this level of efficiency and chemistry that you just don't often see from a team that's, supposedly rebuilding. Markkanen, I mean, he has blossomed into a legit star. Could they be a dark horse contender? I think that's a conversation worth having.
I'm definitely intrigued. And on the other side, the Heat, without Butler, they just look, I don't know, lost.
Yeah, Butler's absence, I think it exposes their over-reliance on him. They need to find ways to, generate offense and maintain their defensive intensity when he's not on the court. And I think it highlights a potential weakness for them come playoff time.
Good point. Now, the Pistons, they also pull off a win, beating the Timberwolves. Cade Cunningham, strong game. 27 points, 10 assists, really showcasing, his all-around abilities.
Yeah, Cunningham's development is crucial for the Pistons' future. He's demonstrating that leadership and the playmaking skills of a true franchise player. And this win, against a more experienced Timberwolves team, that's a really positive sign for their progress.
And let's not forget, Jaden Ivey coming off the bench with 21 points. That Pistons young backcourt, that's something to watch.
Oh, for sure. Ivy brings this dynamic energy to the game. He's fearless when he's attacking the basket, and his athleticism, it's a constant threat. The Timberwolves, on the other hand, they really struggled offensively, particularly Karl Anthony Towns.
It seems like they haven't figured out how to, maximize Towns' potential within their offense yet.
It is the big question mark that's hanging over them.
Right.
They have the talent, but they need to find a way to, play more cohesively and consistently on that end of the floor.
Yeah, it seems like we're seeing a trend here. Teams that can't find that offensive, cohesion, they're struggling. Speaking of struggling, the Pacers actually had a pretty comfortable win over the Suns, who, as we mentioned, are missing Booker. Tyrese Halliburton was the story there. 30 points, 15 assists. He was running the show.
Yeah, Halliburton he's quickly becoming one of the most exciting young, point guards in the league. That vision, his passing ability, it's elite. And he can score too. This game really showcased his potential to be a true franchise cornerstone for the Pacers. It really does. It makes you think about the Pacers' future in the East. Can they make some noise in the playoffs with a talent like Halliburton leading the charge?
It's definitely possible. They've got a young, hungry team, and Halliburton's leadership, it's invaluable. The key for them is going to be, developing that consistency and finding the right pieces around him that complement, his skill set.
All right. And to wrap up our whirlwind tour of the NBA, the 76ers, they had a pretty dominant win over the Nets. Embiid did, Embiid things, 35 points, 12 rebounds, 5 blocks. And Harden had 14 assists. Really, really facilitating the offense.
Yeah, the Sixers are a completely different team when Embiid's healthy.
Right.
And he's playing at this level. And what's encouraging is that, Harden seems to have embraced that role as the playmaker. And when he's distributing the ball effectively like that, their offense it's incredibly difficult to stop.
It looks like the Nets are still trying to, find their footing after those trades. Bridges had a decent game, 24 points.
Yeah.
But they just couldn't keep up with the Sixers.
Yeah, the Nets are clearly in a transition phase. They have a lot of talent, but they need time to develop that chemistry and figure out, their identity. It'll be interesting to see, how they adapt and evolve, over the rest of the season.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. It feels like we saw a bit of everything tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Teams solidifying their status as contenders, others struggling to find their rhythm, and some young players making a statement.
Absolutely. I mean, the beauty of the NBA is that every night brings something new. We saw glimpses of the future, with players like Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, and we saw established stars, like Curry, Jokic continue to dominate.
So after this deep dive into all the action, what stands out to you the most?
I think what's most striking is the importance of team chemistry and cohesion. We saw teams like the Clippers and the Jazz, who are playing well together. They're exceeding expectations. And then we saw teams, like the Timberwolves and the Heat, who are lacking that synergy. They're struggling to reach their potential.
That's a great observation. It's not just about individual talent. It's about how those pieces fit together.
Exactly. It's about finding that right balance, having players that understand their roles and are willing to sacrifice for the good of the team.
It reminds me of that old saying, the strength of the team is each individual member. The strength of each member is the team.
Well said. And I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one final thought you'd like to leave our listener with? Something to ponder as maybe they watch another game tonight or even just as they go about their day?
I would say this. Pay attention to the details.
Yeah.
Don't just watch the game. Try to understand the strategies, the matchups, the adjustments coaches make. The more you analyze and engage with the game on a deeper level, the more rewarding the experience becomes.
I love that. It's about being an active participant, not just a passive observer.
Exactly. Become a student of the game, and you'll be amazed at what you discover.
Great advice. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the NBA. We'll be back soon to break down more action and explore more of the fascinating storylines unfolding in the league.
Yeah, it's like you always say, basketball, it's more than just the score. It's a game of, strategy, adjustments, and those tiny little details, they can really shift the momentum. They can, and that's what makes it so captivating. You gotta look beyond the surface, to truly appreciate, the brilliance and the complexity of the game.
So for our listener who's now ready to, put on their analyst hat, what are some of the matchups or storylines that you're, keeping an eye on as we go forward this season?
Well, out west, I think the battle between the Clippers and the Nuggets, that's going to be fascinating. Both teams, they have championship aspirations, and their head-to-head matchups, they could have some major playoff seeding implications. And of course, I mean, you can never count out the Warriors. They may not be the dominant force that they once were, but with Steph and his ability to, just catch fire at any moment, I mean, they're always a threat.
Yeah, the West is always a wild ride, and in the East, I'm curious to see how the Bucks respond to that loss against the Blazers. Can they regain that aura of invincibility, or are teams starting to figure out their weaknesses?
Yeah, that's the big question. The Bucks, I mean, they're still the favorites, but that loss, it definitely exposed some vulnerabilities. The Celtics and the Sixers, they're both legit contenders, and as we discussed, the Pacers with Halliburton, I mean, they could be a dark horse.
So many intriguing possibilities. Any final thoughts for our listener before we wrap up this deep dive?
I would simply say this. Don't be afraid to form your own opinions and make your own predictions. The NBA, it's full of surprises, and there's no one, right way to analyze the game. So embrace the unpredictability, enjoy the debates, and just let your passion for basketball guide you.
I love that. It's about the journey, the discovery, and the shared love of the game. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep that basketball IQ sharp.